Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the series Death and Other Details with cast members Lauren Patten and Violette Beane. And Violet, starting with you, I mean, the scripts give you so many elements of your character's backstory by continuously giving us more windows into her childhood throughout the series. And I was interested in kind of the gift that that gave you in developing a character, because obviously there's times where you have to fully create that from your imagination, but when you have some of it on the page, how does that change the way that you're able to develop a character?
I mean, it absolutely helps for sure. Also, we were in such a privileged position where we got to read all the scripts or at least understand where our characters were going for the entire season, which is really smart when you're doing a murder mystery, but also smart in general just for acting purposes and for building out characters and making sure that a choice you choose doesn't, then contradict later on in the season. So that was really a privilege in and of its own. But I think really helpful to kind of know what what's going to happen and how you can get there. And you see a lot more of it with Imogen, obviously, than a lot of the other characters. But I do think that, those backstories start to flesh out as the season goes on.
I love that, and Lauren, kind of similarly, you have your family relationship and dynamics so much in the foreground of the narrative, and you get to literally play off of that on screen episode by episode. And because it feels like it informs so much of who she is, similarly, how did that really help you with shaping her?
Yeah, I think the character is really the family is her priority. And she sort of acts as the glue for her family and is always trying to keep all of them together in their chaos. And so I think really it was special to be able to have so many scenes with the different family members and that they're always there, and getting to work with really brilliant actors who were bringing beautiful, surprising, exciting things to each of the characters. It made my job easy in a lot of ways to develop those relationships. Like you were saying, I didn't have to kind of create it by myself before coming to set. I got to come to set and be really present with what they were bringing. And I feel like because of that, we were able to sort of build in this sense of history, of this long family history, with a complicated family like the Colliers. So it was really fun to always be doing scenes with so many family members for the character. Yeah.
I love that, and especially that detail of the fact that you guys had scripts throughout the season up front. But I love that Heidi and Mike, the showrunners, basically went to every single cast member and kind of like talked them through their entire arc at the beginning. So you all knew your individual arcs, but nobody knew any of the other characters' journeys and where they were going, which I've heard like created a very natural suspicion amongst everybody. And I was interested in actually how that gave you something really great to play off of throughout the season, because just in the way that you're all watching and observing each other, you're then doing it in real time because you are literally watching the other character actor's performance and trying to figure out, what's their intention, what are the secrets, what are they hiding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that almost is more in some ways relevant for you, because I feel like playing a character who isn't one of the detectives, almost more the focus is like everybody has a lot to hide on the ship. And in some ways you're more, I feel like all of the characters are in a lot of ways focused on saving their own ass
Yeah,
and protecting what they have to protect. So I felt like that was more where my vibe was.
Yeah.
But I feel like for you,
Well,
you're one of
I
the
mean,
detectives.
there was like this exact moment where just what you're saying happened is like, I think it's in episode 2 when Imogen passes Anna the little note and we're hugging, and I'm quite literally looking at every single cast member, and they're all dealing with the fact that now they have to be like interviewed and interrogated. So they're all like, they have all their little like,
Ticks and
things that are like all the nerves are happening inside of them. And I'm scripted watching them, but I'm also just like, oh, I'm seeing all of this. There's also so many scenes that we don't have with everybody that is happening, which is really fun because you get to follow these characters down their own arcs, but we don't see it when because we're not acting with them. And so it was a whole nother journey watching all of the episodes and then being like, oh, interesting. Like that's where you went with that, or that's how you like, how you have that secret happening. That's been really fun to see.
Yeah. It made it very fun to watch once coming out.
I mean, in Violet, I also love the way that we kind of get to see the evolution of Imogen in terms of like how she watches things and how she looks for clues differently. Obviously, she has, Rufus there kind of giving her different guide points, but spoiler for this week's episode, with there being another person who has shown up. There's another body on the ship at this point. But I loved that scene for you because we kind of just see her like really slow down and just being very still, just really observing everyone in a very different way to the pilot episode. And so how have you wanted to kind of build that growth in her and how she's kind of looking for clues differently throughout?
I think it's a combination of things. I think one of the biggest sides of Imogen, and I think one of the most relatable ones, is that she went through such an insane trauma as a child. And something that does to a kid is sort of builds these natural walls and like doesn't let people in and also isn't affected by things. So I think two of her strengths are that if somebody's telling her something, she doesn't fall for emotionally what they're saying. She can see through it because there's this emotional wall. So you're not getting in that regard. You're not going to be vulnerable with her, and then she's just going to believe everything you're saying. And secondly, she saw her mom die. So like seeing another person on the ship die isn't that scary, bizarre, or sad for her. It's like, well, yeah, people die. So I think that both of those things combined give her a strength that as a detective that like you wouldn't think she would be good at, but because of those, she is.
Yeah. And I also feel like Anna has kind of her own walls up as well, and kind of like a self-protectiveness in a very different way. And so how did you figure out what her defense mechanisms were going to be?
I think that Anna is somebody who is used to operating alone a lot. Like, I don't think she totally knows how to rely on people, because I don't think she had that. I don't think it was that type of family. And I think in some ways, the person that she's relied on the most is Imogene. And then in a different way, her wife, Layla. But I feel like it's always like she allows parts of herself to rely on people, but never entirely. And I think that she's a person who feels very comfortable if she's in control. And so I feel like the whole show, especially up until this point, you're really seeing her not want to acknowledge if things are actually really wrong. And as things start to go horribly wrong in her life, I think it gets to an overwhelming point where you sort of see her break at the beginning of episode 6. But a lot, particularly in the first half of the season, she sort of repeats constantly throughout the show, it's fine, everything's fine. It's just this thing that she's always saying. And I think that that's sort of what her defense mechanism is almost to not acknowledge if things aren't okay, because then it makes her feel like she's not in control of it.
Avoidance, babe.
Yeah.
Let's go.
That's a great defense
Avoidance. Who out there does that?
Top three defense mechanism. Yeah.
And with Imogen as well, I mean, you were talking about the walls that she has up, but it's so real that we get to see them come up and come down. It's kind of a fluid motion. I'm starting to trust this person. I'm going to let them in a little bit. But then if I feel like they have said something that isn't truthful, then immediately that wall just comes straight back up. And so what was the experience of kind of finding that ebb and flow of it for her?
I mean, you see that in this episode that you're talking about. She kind of, she lets somebody in a very real way. And it isn't just, I don't know, it isn't just like a sexual exploration. It's like, oh, my heart is open a little bit, and I'm sharing things with you that I've never shared with anybody else. And then, people are shit.
Yeah.
People make mistakes, people do things. And I think the exploration for me is well, on a personal level, I know exactly what that feels like. I know what it is to have your heart broken and then be like, well, never doing that again. And then ideally you get to a place where you're like, well, if I want how good a love can feel, or a friendship, or whatever it is, if I want that thing, then I can't keep avoiding it. I can't keep putting walls up. I'm going to get hurt, but also, hey, look, I'm still alive, and I've grown from that. And we do see that with Imogene, and we'll see it a couple more times.
Is there sorry.
No, I just was thinking about that and what you're talking about with episode 6 too. And I think I really love that with how you played it with the type of person that Imogene is that she gets really, really pissed at it happening. I feel like a lot of times with female characters, you see them get really like teary and hurt when that happens, and like, I trusted you, and like that type of narrative. And I really loved in watching the episode, like, because it makes sense for Imogene that actually she would just not really want to show how hurt she is, but just be so livid. It feels like it was like a different, because that feels also more not necessarily more real to women in general, but definitely more real to her, and also something that I see less.
Yeah, more like representation of response to things. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, absolutely. That's one of my favorite details too. It's like, rather than having a measured response, it's, I think you should be tied to this chair and I should get to interrogate you and ask you any of the questions I need right this moment. You know, and then she kind of walks it back, which is a very real way. It's like just the instinctual response. Are there other moments in the season where you kind of felt like it was that immediate kind of turning it up to 11, but then talking herself down a little bit internally?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like everyone does that. I feel like everyone goes up to 12 or 13 at certain points.
Yeah.
You definitely have, you know, Anna has her breakdown. Or breakthrough. I don't know how you want to look at it, but
Same.
But yeah, I think that is Imogen's like response is immediate haste and instinct and not really thinking. And that's where I think that the mentorship with Rufus's character is really helpful, because as much as she doesn't believe that he knows anything at all, he does, you know, he does know how to breathe and to see the signs and to not like just jump to emotion. And so that's something that I'm glad Imogen didn't have to begin with, because, you know, hopefully multiple seasons of this show, like then you get to explore that, you know, you get to see how a character develops. And if you just start with all these awesome characteristics, then there's nowhere to go.
And Lauren, you know, I love the moment where we get to see Anna sitting there rehearsing a song with her brother, because it's not just because it's a wonderful opportunity to hear you sing in the show, but because it's such a great character moment and a very different side to how she presents herself to the world most of the time. And so how did a scene like that give you a totally different space to play within?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very funny when Heidi told me that we were going to do a karaoke scene. I think it's a chance to see, you know, at the end of episode 5, I think too much has gone wrong for Anna to still feel like she can say it's fine. And so she has this all-night bender where she just throws it all away, basically. And I think that's the tail end of that. And you sort of, I really love also that scene is with Jack, who plays my brother Trip, and that it's this sort of childlike, even though they're on a lot of drugs, so it's not childlike in that way, but it's this childlike way of processing and just doing something kind of primal and singing badly and trashing this bar and just
also feels like maybe like Anna wants to be that, or like in a sense, like if her like unchecked or maybe checked, I don't know which version is better, but like there's this freedom that you give her in that scene that feels
where she doesn't feel like she has to be put together and like prove a lot of stuff,
and maybe happier. I mean, not that doing drugs and drinking makes you happier. Stay in school.
Violette Beane. Doing drugs and drinking makes you happier. That's the highlight of this interview. The soundbite.
But you know, like you're like, you don't have all this stress, or she doesn't have all this stress put on her that like is just weighing her down, and
an expectation that she puts on herself. And I think also like that is something that in the friendship with Imogene was there, because I think Imogene, I remember that that's one of the ways that Heidi and Mike described the friendship to me early on, was that you were always getting me in trouble, but like in a way that I liked. That was exciting. And that I think Imogene gives Anna this sort of sense of freedom and exhilarating like experience because she's so tightly wound. And at that point in the series, our friendship is starting to fray. And it's sort of like, I'm doing it with my brother, but it's also I'm miserable. It was
how did they pick the song?
Oh, so Heidi picked that song. I think because it's Sail Away, which I think some, you know, with the ship sort of vibe of that. And some of the lyrics worked for the montage. But I know Mike and Heidi have very different tastes in music. And Heidi was told Mike had never heard the song before. And Heidi said, you cannot listen to the song. You will not listen to this song until it is in the show and you see it in the cut. Because she knew he would say, there's no way I want this song in the show. And so the first time he heard it,
it's perfect.
It was in the cut. Oh, yeah. Perfect. It's hilarious. Yeah. Yes.
It's great.
But it's all Heidi.
And he approves now.
Such a
Don't worry.
brilliant choice. And I mean, speaking of the friendship and the relationship between your characters, you know, there's a sibling thing. They're kind of each other's found family to one another, but they obviously had very different upbringings and past experiences. But I think the two of you have done such a beautiful job in capturing those aspects of just the silent language, because whenever you've known someone for that long, there's so much that goes on between the words that you say to each other that you don't even need to say out loud. And so how did the two of you kind of just naturally find a lot of those silent moments and actions, even down to, you know, Anna knows, okay, I'm going to bring you the food that you love on the anniversary of your mom, and you're not going to want to go out, but I'm just going to sit here with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a testament to hiring talented people, because like, so I think so much happens naturally in what you aren't saying. And that's people always say it's like the sign of, you know, whether you're good or not is like, can you stay present? And I think that we've just always just stayed present with each other in those moments. And also we don't hate each other.
Yes.
Also we get along.
Yeah.
So that like that helps.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't a ton of sort of like group or like one-on-one like bonding per se, whereas like sometimes people, like especially if it's a family, you like go to dinners and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And we kind of just like thrown right in when we got to
Yeah.
Vancouver. There wasn't a ton of like prep time. But we just immediately felt it. I feel like just being around each other. And
yeah, I think it was just truly good in the casting, is that it's not that we're really like our characters, but I think energetically the way we connect works for the way that Anna and Imogene connect. And so it always felt very easy.
yeah.
And I think what's cool, you see us in our more close friendship in the first couple of episodes, but then I think also what ends up being telling as the show goes on is the ways in which we're missing each other, almost in which, like you were bringing up the scene in episode 6 where the second body drops, right? And I think there's a little moment in that scene where I think Anna is expecting Imogene to react in a certain way and basically to be prioritizing protecting the family.
Yeah, seeing it as loyalty or something. Yeah.
Yeah, because Anna's priority in that moment is getting Trip out of there because he's freaking out and saying things that almost sound incriminating to the family. And Imogene's priority now, so that we're over halfway through the season, is figuring out who Victor Sams is and solving these murders. And so it's this little moment where Anna's expecting Imogene to react in the way that she would prior to us getting on that ship, like you being a part of the family and prioritizing the family, and then she doesn't. And so in some ways you also see the closeness of the friendship by how when they start to miss each other, it really actually affects them.
And what they're calling out is accurate. Like when Anna says, like, basically just calling her a freeloader and saying she's used her whole life, like that Imogene finding her purpose and not caring about the family as much and trying to find Victor Sams is her like sort of taking like control of her own life and making her destiny a reality. And the only reason she hasn't done that, or part of it, is because she's needed the family. They've raised her and all these things. And so it's interesting when Anna says that, it cuts so deep for both of us, the things that we're saying, because they're true, because they're real. If they weren't, there'd be no weight.
Yeah.
And so it's also a check on ourselves and on our own characters of like, you know, look at who you are. Yeah.
I also want to talk about Anna's relationship with Layla, because, you know, Layla's now essentially said, this just isn't working and I want a divorce. And they've kind of both had a real distance between them for a long time, but they've clearly still wanted to try and find their way back to each other. But it's such a finite ending to say, you know, I want a divorce, like this is it. And so how did you find the way in which you felt like that would untether Anna very specifically?
Yeah, I think it's, as you said, they've had distance for a while. And I think that that's one of the aspects of Anna's life that she does not feel willing to acknowledge or accept. I mean, even with her closest friendship with Imogene, she doesn't really talk about it a whole lot. She doesn't let Imogene in on how bad it's actually been. And I think that in that moment in episode 5, when Layla actually expresses that she wants a divorce, I don't think she really takes it in fully. I don't think she's able to let herself. And it's that feeling when you have a tendency to repress and try to hold on to control of things, it's like it comes out sideways. You're not actually letting yourself feel it properly or process it, but it's still there. And I think that that's all of what's roiling underneath when she has this sort of breakdown in episode 6. All of these things are going wrong and she's not actually taking them in or processing them in the moment. But they are still affecting her. So I think doing that scene with Paradis, who plays Layla, I think that the way that she acted, and I think what part of what's so beautiful is Layla is actually communicating clearly about why it isn't working for her and what she used to feel in the marriage and what she doesn't anymore, and saying, being truly honest and saying she wants a divorce. And Anna just is not able in that moment, in that scene, to truly be as communicative and honest back. And I think she just takes it in as, we'll talk about it later, which says a lot about the type of person that Anna is and how she processes or doesn't process things.
It's so funny because she is one of the most honest characters, and yet everybody thinks she's crazy.
Yeah.
Like in that scene, she's just saying the truth.
Yeah.
Which, like, point to anyone on this boat that's spoken the truth yet, you know?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, it's brutal.
And talking about Imogen's relationship with Rufus, I was just interested in kind of like the ways that it constantly ties back to who she was as a kid and her inner child, because as much as when she tries to push him away and wants distance, that's going back to the disappointment. There's also moments where you can kind of tell, like, if he thinks that she figured something out and is proud of her, that it kind of makes her feel a little bit taller. So how did you want that push and pull to really kind of constantly reconnect to just her inner child and her inner self?
I mean, I think like he's sort of like, I don't know, he's sort of like her dad, you know, like he kind of raised her and gave her that, you know, the I'm proud of you, or like the kiss on the forehead that you get as a kid from a parent. And that's why it hurts so bad what he did and how he left and how he didn't explain anything to her. But I think you still feel that as an adult, you know, you still want that feeling of making somebody proud, or of doing a good job. And I think she also, you know, has to kind of suck it up and realize that he does know what he's doing and that he is helping her get closer to solving not only her mom's murder, but everything else that's happening on the ship, and acknowledge that it feels good to be doing it. So it's definitely a balance.
Yeah. And I was also interested for both of you just in the journey and the experience of finding the tone and the specific voice of this show with Heidi and Mike and with the rest of the cast, especially because when you started filming it, that first table read was over Zoom because of COVID being where it was at the time. So you didn't have that opportunity to kind of be in a room and kind of feel the chemistry in real time until you were on set together doing those pieces. And so how did you set about really figuring out how you wanted your characters and your performances to fit in with what you felt like the tone of the show was going to be?
I mean, I feel like it was a group effort. It took us a little bit. I mean, the honest answer is we figured it out during the first 2 episodes of filming, because if it is a really specific tone for the show, it doesn't take itself super seriously. It's not high drama, but it's also not full in farce or camp mode. It's somewhere in between. And I think I remember specifically filming what I think is our first scene in the pilot on the pool deck. And we were going through takes. We were like, was that the right? We were trying different tones.
Every take was so different, which also was its own experience.
Yes.
Like, I think we also, I mean, we shot a pilot and then we got picked up and then we reshot some of it. And then there was notes from the studio, and there's all these different people. There's all these cooks, you know, and they have all their spices. And it definitely was a journey to find it. But I feel like even by episode 2, it feels like it's set in, and it works. And I love the fact, like the way you read the script, it's so fast paced and so fast cut. And then when you see the edit of it and you see the final product, like it feels like how it reads, which that I think comes across so potently. And but it was a journey for sure. Just kind of figuring out where it sits. Yeah.
And for a brand new show too, it's just I think that's a process for any brand new show. But I think because we're sort of honoring a classic genre while also finding a sort of tricky balance of what type of humor we were doing,
Yeah.
it you know, it was a process and some work, but also watching it, I was like, wow, we did it.
Yeah.
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 Well, I really, really love everything that you've both built into your characters. So congratulations on a great series. And thank you so much for talking about it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.